everyone is always dealing with so much. So I think compassion and empathy always goes a really long way.
Tanya, it is great to have you on the Go with Manav. Could you please tell everyone a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So I'm Tanya Marwaha and I'm 22 years old and I'm a mental health, disability and suicide prevention advocate. And what that means in essence is that I use my lived experience to educate and empower other people when it comes to these usually taboo subjects, and I'm really passionate about making a change in these areas.
Awesome. So let's get straight on to it. I think the first question is, since you mentioned about mental health being very tabooed, and I totally agree on that, and especially coming from a South Asian point of view as well, could you please tell us, or in your perspective, why is mental health so important to you personally?
Well, I think mental health is important to me because mental health is something that we all have. And, it's in the same way that I would value my physical health is the way at which I value my mental health. But I think my journey with my mental health really started when I was younger. So from as early as I can remember, I've always struggled with my mental health, but it's only through hindsight that I've learned that these were mental health difficulties. So when I was younger, as a child, I was always labeled very sensitive, very overwhelmed. I used to struggle a lot with processing my emotions, and everyone used to tell me that it was a phase I would eventually grow out of. But in hindsight, I was actually showing signs of childhood anxiety. And then eventually, when I was 13 years old, we were dealing with a lot of bereavement on my father's side of the family. And that really kickstarted a quite intense journey with my mental health, where I started to struggle with suicidal ideation. And that's when I had my first suicide attempt as well. And that was the start of a long journey up until now, and it will continue on when it comes to dealing with depression and anxiety. So when I was 15, I was eventually diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and I've tried, CBT, therapy, on and off with antidepressants, trying my own kind of self-care strategies to manage for those conditions. That's why for me, mental health is so important, because it's shaped a big part of my life experiences till date, and also the person that I am and the work that I do.
And how do you feel like your mental health diagnosis have changed the way you now live your life, would you say?
I think it helped me accept what I was dealing with and also validate the thoughts and feelings that I was experiencing. So I think, like being 13 and dealing with suicidal ideation is a scary place to be, because you can't describe or understand what you're truly experiencing. So I think having those diagnoses helped me accept what I was dealing with and also then take the right steps to seek the support I need. And I think it also helped me understand that this was a journey that I'm going to be on for the rest of my life. So it's really important that I find sustainable long-term ways to look after my own mental health.
And how did the South Asian community react when you are now very vocal about your mental health struggles? Did they criticize you? Because I would say usually we're taught to hide our struggles, or we're taught internally to, not talk about them and just put a brave face and just go out there. It's seen more as a weakness more than a strength. So how do you take it personally, and how do you use that to your advantage?
I've had very mixed reactions from our South Asian community, whether that's extended family, friends, or people, online or social media. What I've noticed is that a lot of people initially started off perceiving it a little bit negatively. There was a level of uncertainty as to why I'm speaking up about these topics. But I think it's taken some time for a lot of individuals, especially those close to me, to really understand my experiences, why I think there's value in sharing them, being able to see the impact of what sharing my experiences have had to date, and wrap their head around how it's an important topic that we should be talking about and how they can continue to facilitate that safe space. So I think it has been difficult. I mean, it's quite a stereotypical South Asian thing for people to question what that means for your future. So I've had some people say to me, why are you so vocal about it? What is that going to mean for your career? What is that going to mean for when you want to get married? Or, what will other people think and what will other people say? But I think for me, it's been a really important journey to separate myself from that external noise and really focus in on the vision and the purpose through which I do the work, and make sure that that's always first and foremost before anything that anyone else has to say.
Do you feel like there is a particular moment where you were like, aha, I'm going to use my struggles or my experiences to do great things? And is that what led you to, for example, becoming the founder of Chronically Strong and championing young youth minds? And
Mhm.
if that's the case, could you please tell us a bit more about those?
So I think there was a moment when I was 19. So it was the first COVID lockdown, and I was in my first year of university. And I remember it had been, I think, a month or two since we had all been sent back home and we were studying from home. And that was actually my most recent suicide attempt. I was really struggling with my mental health at that point, and I just didn't see any other way out of it. And I think coming out of that, recovering from that suicide attempt, I eventually saw the urgent mental health care services local to me. And when I saw them, they said to me that, you look fine now. You just got to continue on. If you start feeling like that again, you just speak to your GP or call 111. And when I came back from that interaction, I think it just really shocked me because I felt like I don't know how much further down I need to go for someone to notice and for someone to provide me with support that I need. So I think for me, that was a point where I sat and I really reflected back on the, experiences that I've had throughout my lifetime when it comes to my mental health, the absence of support and the absence of awareness that's been there. And also knowing that these are conditions that I'm going to be living with for the rest of my life, trying to understand how I can almost try to pull myself out of this dark place. So that's when I took the decision of, I'm kind of in a position where I don't have any choice but to speak about it because speaking about it is hopefully going to bring some positivity. That's when I started Chronically Strong and Championing Youth Mind. So Chronically Strong originally was just a platform for me to share mental health, but also disability. So I live with long-term non-visible disabilities. And once again, especially within our South Asian community, it's something we don't talk enough about. It's something that people perceive as shameful, but in reality, there are so many of us who live with non-visible disabilities and or mental health difficulties. So it was really a space to almost just brain dump my thoughts and feelings and share that with the world, because oftentimes I find that it's easier to write something and post it rather than having to have a face-to-face conversation with people. So that's how Chronically Strong was born. And then Championing Youth Mind was born from a desire to bridge the educational gap that we have at the moment within the, school system, where there is a gap in terms of mental health education. So we learn a lot about physical health growing up, but we don't learn about mental health. And my own experiences had taught me that there wasn't anywhere at school that I could go to where I felt like I had the support or I could access the education. All of the education and support I found was online or through social media, which for me wasn't very helpful. I really wanted to create a community of young people where we open up topics around mental health and we discuss those in ways that allow us to feel more educated and empowered to look after our own mental well-being. So started that as an Instagram page, and that organically grew into a community, and we create free resources, deliver free workshops to schools, universities, and different communities for young people.
You're still continuing with both projects right now to this day, I'm assuming.
Yeah, definitely.
And since you work full time as well, and you're doing these incredible opportunities where you're giving talks as well and being very passionate about mental health, how do you balance entrepreneurship with your full time job? And for people who are looking to get into the entrepreneurship field, for example, what would you advise them also while dealing with your mental health?
Yeah, good question. It's very difficult, and it's been a journey full of ups and downs to figure out what works for me and what doesn't work for me. But I think the biggest advice that I could give, and the most important thing for me, is whilst doing these things and balancing them, is making sure that I'm taking care of my mental health first and foremost. So I try to say no to opportunities if I feel like they're not going to positively benefit my mental well-being or my journey with my mental health. And I also just ensure that I'm always factoring in time for like self-care, rest. Noticing any signs of potential burnout is really important, making sure that my friends and my family or colleagues that I work with are aware of what those signs of burnout might look like so that they can also help hold me accountable to that. And I think it's really just, like I said, a journey full of ups and downs. So particularly last summer was a really difficult time for me because I think I started to feel quite burnt out from some of the projects that I was doing on suicide prevention. So in that time, it was really important for me to take a step back, make sure I had time to go on holiday, do all the things in life outside of work and entrepreneurship. And I think it's really important if someone is thinking about going into entrepreneurship and also balancing a job, for example, is making sure that you're living a holistic, well-rounded life. I think that's something that oftentimes when you're driven by passion, you get blinded by that passion and you sometimes forget about the very human things like socializing, doing the things that you enjoy, or just doing the day-to-day life admin things. So I think it's really important to not get too sucked into that passion that you forget to live the life that you would want to live.
Yeah, that's a very good answer because I would also tell myself, for example, I'm the type of person who burns out a lot, but I acknowledge that actually. I see it more as a thing where I tell myself, oh, I'm actually doing a lot of things right now. I tend to suppress all of those emotions around me, for example. I'm very good at suppressing things. It's difficult at times when things don't go our way as well, because it's like if you're feeling happy, you kind of want that to continue, but it's never going to last permanently. It's always going to be a temporary feeling. And that's the same thing with being sadness. There's always going to be moments where when you're feeling happy, don't have that expectation for a long time, because you're also going to end up feeling sad. And that's the same thing. You're feeling anxious or angry. All of those emotions are just temporary. So when things don't go your way, while you're also being very passionate about mental health and have your own struggles as well, do you have any coping mechanisms or ways you deal with those sort of conflicts?
I think the biggest thing that's helped me has been a mindset shift into how I perceive those moments that don't go right or well for me. And I think one really important quote that's actually helped me on my journey has been that rejection is redirection. And I think especially when you're an entrepreneur, you're working on something that you're so passionate about, it's hard to hear no, and it's hard to experience when things don't go right. And I think before I used to see that as, that's another obstacle that's kind of thrown me off path. I now need to work harder. But the way I now perceive it, and I think this mindset shift has been really healthy for my own mental health, has been to perceive it as, that's helping me be redirected to what's actually meant for me. And it kind of goes into a more like spiritual thinking realm, but I think that narrative that I've instilled in myself has been really helpful. And I mean, I've seen it be tried and tested along my journey. So there have been moments where someone said no to me and I thought, oh my goodness, that's my entire project gone. I don't know how this is going to work. That's the worst thing that could have happened. And then the following day, someone will reach out to me on LinkedIn and send a message, and that will just bring this huge opportunity that I would have never imagined. And it happens over and over again where it's one message or one event and one person I see that completely provides me with, a new path and a new opportunity that I had not thought of for myself. So I think it's about having faith, and I think finding strategies that work for you. So when something doesn't go my way, for example, I like to do a brain dump. So I sit and I write down exactly how I'm feeling. And once I've done that, at least it's out of my system and I'm not kind of ruminating on it mentally. And then what I like to do is apply the mindset perception of, okay, this is what's happened, but how many more possibilities are there of things that could come for me? And going back through my journey and remembering those moments where things didn't go so well, but then a month later or a week later or a day later, something else amazing came up. So I think it's really about like reflection and also gratitude. So making sure you're gratitude towards the things that you're grateful for.
Yeah, I think that's a very great answer, because I also totally agree about rejection is also known as redirection, because it's very easy to be caught in the moment and just think or doubt yourself that you're not good enough just because someone said no to you. But that's only a temporary feeling. There's always going to be something better is going to be coming in your way. You just have to sort of wait for it and be patient. I know people tell me to be patient, and I know that's a really tough thing to do, because it's a matter of just waiting for that expectation. Why can it just come now instead of sometimes it might take like months or years, but I'm not sure if that's the same with you. But I also feel like if I'm always overthinking something, I'll do the brain dump as well, where I'll just let it all out and think of the good things about myself. For example, everything I've done in my life so far, it's just been a matter of, I'll just tell myself exactly what you said, that the rejection you get from whichever opportunity, it wasn't meant for you. It was definitely the redirection of something is going to be coming ahead. You just have to wait for it and believe in yourself. So I'm also now going to ask you, how do you deal with self-belief? Because there's always going to be moments where we like to compare ourselves. So how would you deal with that, for example, as an entrepreneur and your life so far?
Yeah, I mean, self-belief is something like very honestly I've always struggled with, and I'm still struggling with, grappling with it at the moment. And I think especially when you're in the entrepreneurship space, or even if we talk about the mental well-being space at the moment, there's a very saturated space to be in, and you're constantly comparing yourself with other people, especially even you get to a point where you start comparing your own lived experiences. So, oh, their lived experience sounds so much worse than mine, few thoughts like that. And I think it's been really important for me to understand what factors are contributing towards this imposter syndrome or this negative self belief that I've been developing. And it's taken a long time for me to figure it out. But, I found that actually consuming quite a lot of content on social media, and particularly LinkedIn, hasn't been very helpful for me. So before, I used to, scroll through LinkedIn, engage with people's content, and I really wanted to see what other people were doing and learn from them. But I found out that actually for me, that was causing a lot of anxiety, and that was, developing into negative self-belief and negative self-thoughts. So for me, what's been really important has been reducing or cutting out certain things, so I don't consume content anymore, really. I just kind of post and leave it and walk away, because I don't need that extra factor contributing towards it. So that kind of goes to, reducing some of that, but then also working on how I can improve my own self-belief. And I think a lot of it is about going back to the things that you've done. So going back to the things you're grateful for, going back to the things you've done, and using that to positively reaffirm, ways in which you view yourself. And I think I've always often found that there's always been a disconnect between how other people perceive me and how I perceive myself. So I think a lot of it for me has been reconciling those two versions of me, and understanding that, we're the same person. It's just that I'm looking at myself through a different lens than other people do.
I think that's a very great distinction, because we live two separate lives almost. There's the self that we show people,
Hmm.
that everything's great, but inside, for example, I cannot imagine as well you being an entrepreneur. People might not necessarily talk about the negatives or downsides. Like, I cannot imagine the pressure, the stress, the lack of sleep, the commitments, the dedication you have to keep committing and proving that, what I'm doing is worth it. And I'm sure that's what you've been doing so far with all your projects. It is very common for all of us to sort of go through those experiences where we are showing a facade of
Hmm.
where things are seeming like a fantasy, but in reality, we're living in sort of our worst nightmare. And again, we just have to be strong. And I guess that's what I've also been just taught growing up, is just put on a brave face no matter what, and just be a champ and just go out there. And so I'm going to ask you now, what's been the most proudest moment in your life? Because I cannot imagine the accomplishments and the achievements you've had so far throughout your career. And
Hmm.
obviously, being someone in your early 20s, like right now, you have a long way to go. So do you have like a particular one you could choose?
Good question. I think there's lots of different proud moments I have, but I think a recent one, which I think comes to mind as soon as you said that, was I did a recent segment on BBC Newsnight around South Asian mental health. And for me, I think that's one of my proudest moments, because initially, when I started 4 years ago talking about mental health and suicide prevention, I think I hid a part of my story, which was around being South Asian and all the cultural context that came into my experiences. And I think it's only since I've become more comfortable in myself and developed that self belief that I felt comfortable enough to start sharing those aspects of me, because it felt extremely vulnerable to be doing that. And to be able to be specifically sharing my experiences around that topic was really special. And also knowing and having the support of family members. So I spoke to some of them before and also after, who initially never knew when I was really struggling when I was 13 years old, for example, had no idea what I was dealing with. And I always used to be so worried about their perception and how they would think of me if they found out. So to be in this position now, almost 10 years later, where I can talk about it and know that they have, they're supporting me, and they're listening in, and it just helps to kind of continue and take that momentum further. So I think that's definitely one of the proudest moments today.
There is a saying that it all will pay off in the end. And I'm 100% sure that was the case with you as well. When you had that BBC opportunity and just having your family being there, it must have been a dream and something you did not expect in a very long time. So I'm
Hmm.
going to take you back when potentially at a time where you were probably going through a lot of these struggles, let's say about 12 and 13.
Hmm.
And I cannot imagine you being in that position right now and not knowing what's going to be there later on in your life. The past 4 years have been life changing for you, and you've had a lot of amazing opportunities coming your way. And when you are at a point of rock bottom, you do wonder and you question yourself a lot on your worth. So, what sort of advice would you give to someone at the age of 13, or when you were 13 as well? What would you tell your 13-year-old self now, seeing how far you've come?
Hmm. Good question. I think I would say, you don't need to be like other people to be valued and to be worthy. I think that's definitely something I really have struggled with. And I think also that your voice and your opinion matters. I think even now, sometimes the thought comes in my head of like, who cares to listen to my story? Like, why is this important? But I think telling myself and each and every young person especially, that your voice and your story matters. There's always value in every experience that we have. You just don't see it in the moment. It's usually something you see with hindsight. So I think those would be the two main things that I would say. And also, it does get better as much as you like don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's a bit of a cliche saying, but there always is light at the end of the tunnel. You just probably don't see it in the moment.
Definitely. And I feel like when you hear these things when you're a lot younger, it doesn't make any sense at all. Like you
Hmm.
would usually think, oh, light of a tunnel, is that like going on a playground slide or something? Obviously,
Yeah.
we're too naive to think about that. But then when you go through certain situations, that just opens your mind to seeing what real life is about and just the world and just what people are all about, sort of just channeling that and putting that into action. Again, like right now, saying that means so much more than when we were to ask ourselves like 5 or 10 years ago, because we're, for example, Gen Z, our generation's a lot more open about all of these sorts of conversations now than probably ever before. Let's go forward. For example, we already talked about 13-year-old. So let's go into the next 10 years of your life. Where do you envision or would like to see yourself doing, or yeah, what do you hope to be doing in the next 10 years?
I would hope to be continuing to create a positive impact through storytelling. If you had asked me this maybe 3 years ago, I would have given you a very comprehensive 10-year plan. But I've ditched that now, because I think one thing that I've learned through this journey is that uncertainty is actually exciting, because you don't know what's to come. And it's actually very good for your mental health sometimes to embrace that uncertainty. So I think in terms of where I see myself in the next 10 years, would be continuing to do that, whether that's through speaking, writing, delivering training, delivering workshops, whether it's through championing youth minds, chronically strong, or any other new projects. I think that the main thing for me is, to continue talking about these topics and hopefully continue to impact lives. And I think for me, it just really goes back to those times when I've done talks or I've, delivered content, and people reach out and say, you've spoken about something which has made me feel like I can speak about it. Or, for example, I did a talk at a school, and, a girl came up to me afterwards and says, I've been feeling suicidal for the last few weeks, but I don't tell anyone. I finally just told my teacher. So it's those things and those impacts that I want to continue to be able to, make, and also to be able to tell people that there is value in sharing your story, and, just keep on doing it. It's really powerful.
There are two things I've learned from your answer, and that is one, uncertainty can be really scary. And that is just because we don't like being stuck in a situation where we don't really know what's going on. We always like to have something to look forward to. So I guess for everyone in general, I think having that uncertain moment, people translate that into fear instead of actually using that as a strength almost, because I think that was also the same thing during COVID. And I think it's a blessing in disguise. And the second thing is that even what you were saying, by going to these schools and just interacting with young kids and people who have been a lot more vocal about their struggles in front of you, you honestly do not know what people are going on behind closed
Mhm.
doors. I've been told that many times. I've seen it many times in people. And I guess that's why just the easiest thing just to do is just to be kind, because the last thing you just want is something negative thrown at your face when you're having a long, not the best day. I have a lot of respect for people who have to commit and do lots of different sorts of careers, or just in general. I mean, everyone's just trying to survive at this point. So it means a lot, I guess, but people just don't realize it, but they're actually making a lot of progress.
Yeah, and I think it's because we're so used to undermining our own growth and our own actions, and also, we live in a day and age where on social media we only see people's highlight reels of their achievements. So it's quite easy to, forget about what you're doing. But I think, like you said, everyone is always dealing with so much. So I think compassion and empathy always goes a really long way.
I totally agree. And the final question is, what are you up to now?
Good question. So continuing with the speaking, going into schools, going into businesses, I've been taking another focus, which is around cultural competencies. So focusing a little bit more on, the cultural influences and experiences when it comes to suicide, mental health, and disability. Because I think, like I said before, it's a really important part of my story, and it's something I think I haven't really given as much value as I am trying to do now. So continuing to focus on that, and I really want to engage the South Asian community when it comes in this conversation. I think there are so many amazing individuals within the space doing work. However, they're not given the same platform as some other communities. So for me, that's the focus right now. And I think, as always, being open to opportunities and embracing things as they come.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Tanya. I mean, first, I wish you the best of luck. I'm very sure that you're going to go on and do amazing things in the future as well. And if people want to get in touch with you or like to, just want to know more about you, what's the best way they can liaise with you?
Percy, thank you so much for having me and your kind words. It's been a very insightful discussion. And if anyone's interested in getting in contact, I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, X. It's all at Tanya Marwaha, so they can feel free to get in touch.
Awesome. And thank you guys for watching as well. If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and stay tuned for a new guest podcast coming in your way very soon. Thanks for joining us, Tanya.
Thank you.